Hello world, it is I, the Mystic Philosopher. And of course you are once again tuned to the right number, the Mystic Philosopher. Let me also welcome you to another of my video presentations in the series titled The Redemption from the Curse of the Black Spell. This presentation today is titled Ebola, a Charles Darwin's end-time prophecy revealed. It is a follow-up, as I've promised, in one of my most recent video presentations called What's Wrong with This Picture? Now, if this is the first time that you might be watching or listening to any of my YouTube videos, I ask that you please check out all the rest of my videos that are here on this my channel called The Right Number, the Mystic Philosopher. I can almost guarantee you that if you are seriously and honestly interested in getting another perspective on many topics or subjects that some people in ignorance and others knowingly and deceptively called controversial, some of which topics and subjects that you might not have taken, you might have just taken for granted, things that you might have just accepted as truth, having been taught for all your life by the system and society that they are true, and some of which you might not even seriously thought about all by yourself. Now, here is a place. If that's the case, then here is the channel. Here is a place that you might want to be tuned to. You are on the right channel. You're at the right place at the right time. Here you'll no doubt receive another perspective. Now to the subject at hand. Ebola, a Charles Darwin's end-time prophecy revealed. That's our topic. Ebola, a Charles Darwin's end-time prophecy revealed. Now, there are lots of talk about prophets and the people that are called prophets and prophetess, and the thing called prophecy. We hear talk about the Bible prophets, or we hear talk about prophets of the Bible and Bible prophecies. We hear talk about prophets of God and God's prophecies. We hear talk about false prophets and false prophecies. We also hear talk about end-time prophet and end-time prophecies. We hear talk about doomsday prophets and doomsday prophecies. And of course, we hear talk about master prophets. In fact, some even call themselves master prophets and master prophetess. In fact, I can remember some time ago watching and listening to some fancy commercial of one guy on television who called himself the master prophet. And I was a bit taken aback on the very famous people from among my people, our people, including some very famous politicians, entertainers, preachers, celebrities, some of the systems educated people, and others that were his clients. These people were his believers and very faithful followers. And that I was very much taken aback that they were advertising and promoting him and his product, promoting him as a master prophet or as the master prophet, and also his products are, to the world, whatever he was selling or promoting, they're talking about him as if, in fact, with more passion, more zeal, more enthusiasm, with more favor than when you listen to them preach about who they consider to be their other master, namely known as Jesus Christ. I thought that some of these people, just watching them, would have remained, because of the status and the position they had. At least I thought that they would have remained independent and neutral, having claimed to have their own mission. But there they were, promoting this self-proclaimed master prophet, no doubt for or to enhance their own fame and their monetary profits as well, because these guys do nothing for free. Well, I, the Mystic Philosopher, I am sure that most of you, if not all of you, that are watching and listening to this, my lecture presentation on this channel called Right Number, the Mystic Philosopher, have never heard of Charles Darwin being a prophet, or being called a prophet, or of his, Charles Darwin's, prophecies, let alone hearing anyone talk about Charles Darwin's end-time prophecy, or Charles Darwin's end-time prophecies. I am sure that most of you may admit, at least to yourself, that you have never heard of such a thing before. You've never heard your preacher or your whoever talk to you or mention the fact of Charles Darwin's being a prophet, or of his prophecies, or at least one of his prophecy, which we shall be seeing in this presentation. So in this presentation, I would like to clearly answer the 5 most important questions that I think most of you that are watching and listening by now are asking yourselves, and no doubt would like to have answered. And the 5 questions are: 1, who is this Charles Darwin? And question 2, was Charles Darwin a prophet? 3, what is meant by Charles Darwin's end-time prophecy, or Charles Darwin's end-time prophecies? And 4, what is his prophecy, or what are his prophecies? And 5, is Charles Darwin's prophecy being fulfilled on us, the natural native earthly humans today? Well, let's approach question 1. Let's look at question 1 first. Who was Charles Darwin? Because most people really don't know about Charles Darwin, or in fact most of my people didn't really, may have heard a little about Charles Darwin. But let me just give you a little quick background on who this fellow is, or who he was. Charles Darwin was an Englishman, and as such, as an Englishman, he was a Caucasian whose ancestors came out of the Caucasus Mountain. His ancestors came out of the Caucasus Mountain fully inspired and determined to conquer, subdue, dominate, control, colonize, civilize, rule, and own the earth, and to eventually, in the name of their Lord, in the name of their lords, God, gods, king, or kings, and queen, or queens, and country, exterminate all of us that are the natural native earthly humans, and then replenish the earth with and by themselves. Charles Darwin was born in the year 1809 into a British family of great wealth. A British family of great wealth, privilege, prestige, and power. His father being a doctor and a British financier. It is also interesting to note that he was born during the time of the British transatlantic slave trade, and that by the time slavery was legally abolished, and please note, that not by the time slavery was morally abolished, which never happened, spiritually abolished, which never happened, intentionally abolished, which hasn't happened, ethically abolished, hasn't happened, or humanely abolished, hasn't happened, or financially abolished. Please note. But legally abolished in England, he was 24 years of age. And that the possibility does exist that his family, no doubt, must have benefited significantly, directly or indirectly, from the slave trade or of my people throughout the British Empire. He was also born a Christian, Unitarian to be precise. He was baptized an Anglican Christian, brought up and grew up an Anglican Christian. He was also, at the very least, partially trained, educated in the Christian theology, with the hope of his father that he would have become an Anglican priest, also called an Anglican parson. However, Charles Darwin, is much better known today the world over as one of the founders, if not the chief founder and architect of the Darwin's gospel, called the theory of evolution or evolution. And even though most Christians today will say that Charles Darwin's gospel of the theory of evolution is the nemesis or the arch enemy of Christian theology, but what they don't want you to know is that it too was born out of a Christian mind and inspired by the Christian God. And from my perspective, he was a Black Caucasian. Charles Darwin was a Black Caucasian scientist and a Black Caucasian prophet that in life and now in death is still carrying out the wishes, dreams, hopes, ambitions and aspirations of his ancestors. And just in case you may have missed it, the goals and aspiration of the Black Caucasians and their heirs and successors today are to conquer, subdue, dominate, control, colonize, rule, and own the world or own the earth, and to eventually, in the name of their Lord, their lords, their God, gods, king, kings, queens, and their country, in their name, to exterminate all of us that are the natural, native, earthly humans, and then to replenish the earth with themselves and by themselves. Now, question 2. Was Charles Darwin a prophet? Now, from my perspective, the simple answer to this question is yes. The man that is considered by many to be the patriarch and founder of the gospel and theory of evolution, and the author of what is considered by many to be the Evolution Bible, the world's renowned Charles Darwin, was a prophet. And his prophecy or prophecies are being fulfilled on us, the natural native earthly humans, today. And at this very moment. But for a much more detailed answer, and in order to provide more evidence, more reasons and facts to back up my claim or my reasoning, especially to those of you, my very intelligent viewers and listeners that are not just gullible mental sponges that will just suck up and believe any and everything that you hear, let me first answer the question by clearly defining who or what is a prophet, and also what are prophecies. So, who is a prophet and what are prophecies. Again, you all know that the English language, it's not my language, it's not my ancestors' language. My ancestors were only taught a bastardized version of it. And for those of you who may have watched and listened to my previous videos, you may have heard me said and repeatedly that I do not know the language, and because this is the only means of communication to most people, then the closest I can ever get to learning and understand and decoding my ancestors, slave masters, their heirs and successors' language, the English language, is by frequent use of their dictionary or dictionaries. So here again, I will quote from their dictionary the meaning and definition, not just the meaning, but also the definition of the word prophet and prophecies, in order that you might see how I'm using the word and we may all have one common understanding before we can get to anything called overstanding of who and what is a prophet and why Charles Darwin is or was a prophet and why his prophecies are being manifested today. So, according to the freedictionary.com, a prophet is, and I quote, 1, a person who speaks by divine inspiration or as the interpreter through whom the will of a God is expressed. That's 1. 2, a prophet is a person gifted with profound moral insight and exceptional powers of expression. 3, a prophet is a predictor or a soothsayer. And 4, a prophet is the chief spokesperson of a movement or cause, unquote. Now, for the purpose of this lecture presentation, I will just focus on definition 1 and definition 3. Now, from my perspective, definition 1, from the free dictionary, the free online dictionary.com, can be and is divided into 2 parts or 2 answers. So I refer to as 1A and 1B. Definition number 1A, a prophet is a person who speaks by divine inspiration. Or 1B, a prophet is the interpreter through whom the will of a God is expressed. So from definition 1A, we can clearly see, or at the very least, we can logically deduce that a prophet does not and a prophet cannot speak prophecies, speak prophetic words or prophecy, or a prophet cannot prophesy on his or her own or by him or herself. This is according to definition 1A. In other words, a prophet cannot be called upon by any and everyone, any and everywhere, and every time. Or a prophet cannot be on standby or be suddenly awakened from, for example, a prophet cannot be suddenly awakened from his or her sleep and call upon to prophesy and to immediately start prophesying about anything and everything. The people that claim that they can do such things and the people that are claiming to be doing such things are not at all prophets. From my perspective, these people that are prophets, in fact, these people are prophets. Let me repeat. From my perspective, these people that are prophets for hire, because you have people who can be hired as prophets to tell you things. These people that are prophets for hire are standby prophets and 24/7 prophets. They are not even false prophets. Again, please look at the definition. They may be best described and classified as predictors that are offering predictions based on their feelings or their own feelings, based on their intelligence or experience, etc. But not prophets. They are not prophets in the strictest sense of the word And as it is hereby, the word prophet is hereby defined in definition 1a, and as you shall also see, defined as it is being defined in definition 1b. Because strictly speaking, and as you shall no doubt shortly see, that a prophet cannot be true and a prophet cannot be false either. However, his or her prophecy or his or her prophecies can be true or false, because a prophet is not the source of the message or the prophecy. A prophet is not the source of the message or the prophecy. So if the message or the prophecy that is conveyed or that is transmitted by a prophet is true, or if it is false, or if it is proven to be true or proven to be false, then the prophet is neither to be credited or discredited, but it is the source of the message that is to be credited or to be discredited. The words that a prophet speaks, utters, or prophesies while under the inspiration and possession of his or her God and master are words that are divinely inspired by his God and master. Divinely inspired literally means inspirited. In other words, a spirit, also called an energy, an entity, a vibration, etc., from a source, meaning a vine, has entered and possessed him or her. Him or her meaning the prophet, or a spirit that is communicating through him or her, and thus prompts him or her to speak. It's meaning the divines, or the source, the spirit, or the God's word or words. So in reality, and if or when all things are considered, there are no words of a prophet. And as the saying, and I quote, the word or the words of the prophet, unquote, is not true or sensible. In other words, when a person that is called a prophet, or when a person that is known to be a prophet speaks, or on his or her own, or on his or her, or by his, or of his or her own, he or she is not a prophet, but just an ordinary person. Let me repeat. When a person that is called a prophet, or when a person that is known by others to be a prophet speaks on his or her own, of his or her own, he or she is not a prophet, but is just an ordinary person. From this you can see that yes, there are some people that the spirit of a god, the spirit of another density, or the spirit of prophecy may have entered and may have spoken through them once or twice, but that spirit may have long left them long ago, and it may have never returned, or it may have left them never to return. But some of these people, just for their own ego, for the sake of their own ego, their own notoriety, their own privileges, and of course their own financial gains and fame, etc., they just can't shut up. And as a result, they just keep on making things up and keep on speaking. So a lot of people that speak things are not prophets. They are just making up things and stories as they go along. Now let's continue. Definition 1b. A prophet is the interpreter through whom the will of a God is expressed. So here again, we can clearly see, and in accordance with definition 1a, we can also logically deduce that a prophet is an interpreter, meaning a prophet is a spokesperson, a prophet is a conduit, a channel, a medium, a vessel, a vehicle, etc., through whom the will of a God, meaning the will of a source, the will of a vine, etc., is expressed. In other words, the will of a God is carried out through a prophet. Please note that a prophet is not a person or an individual who is carrying out his or her will. In other words, a prophet cannot carry out his or her will. Anybody that is claiming to be doing that is not a prophet. In fact, and as I have said before, he or she is not even a false prophet. For example, anybody that is telling you that they can tell you what is going to happen to you, and they can change your destiny, and for a fee, they can change your destiny, or they can change what is about to happen to you, or stop it from happening, is not a prophet. True or false, they are neither a true prophet or a false prophet, period. What they are just scammers and hustlers at best. Let's look at the meaning and definition of 1b again. A prophet is the interpreter through whom the will of a God, a master, or God meaning a master, or the master, is expressed. Now please note again, whose will is being carried out and whose will is being done. It is the will of a God, a master, and not the will of the prophet. It is not the will of the interpreter. It is not the will of the medium. It is not the will of the channel. It is not the will of the servant or the slave, etc. But it is the will of a God or the master. Our activated common sense alone will or should tell us that it is the God who is the master that tells or orders, instructs, or command rather, are impressed upon the slave what to do. And if we know that to be true, or if we know that to be the case, then how we have some people that are calling themselves master prophets and master prophetess. What they are nothing but master scammers, master hustlers, or master cons, master pimps, master ripoffs at best. And some of which are just out there scamming, conning, hustling, pimping, and ripping off our people out of the very little that they have. Another point of fact that I must also point out and make mention before we go on here is that a prophet is not an interpreter of scriptures or writings of other prophets. A prophet does not interpret other people's writings or other people's prophecies. So all those people, some of whom are very famous people that you may know or heard of, both past and present, that have gone around and that are going around interpreting Bible scriptures and other writings, etc., and making predictions based on such, while calling themselves prophets and prophetess, answering to the name and title prophet and prophetess, and known to many as prophets and prophetess, are not at all prophets, but like the so-called master prophets mentioned above, they are all nothing but expert scammers, expert hustlers, or expert cons, expert ripoffs at best, and some of which are just out there scamming, conning, hustling, ripping off, pimping our people out of the very little that they have. Let us now look at definition 3 again from the freedictionary.com. The word prophet, and I quote, a prophet is a predictor or soothsayer, unquote. So we see also that a prophet is a predictor, or that the word prophet is synonymous with predictor, and soothsayer. Soothsayer meaning a person supposed to be able to foresee the future. So why and how is Charles Darwin a prophet or a predictor and a soothsayer? Well, from my perspective, Charles Darwin was indeed a prophet, and one that was not of an ordinary caliber and mind. Because from my perspective, the things that he said, or the prophetic words that he wrote, and especially the prophetic words that were and that are directed at my people, we that are the natural native earthly humans, the work that he did in his time and the impact that he had on the world since then, and especially the power and influence he had, and power and influence he is currently having on the system's mastermind today. The system's intellectuals, the system's educators, the system's politicians and governments, etc., was not and are not of his own, but they are of another density or another dimension, another realm. They are of the density or dimension or realm of his source, of his and his people, the Black Caucasians, God. The mankind, Charles Darwin, was only an interpreter, a medium, a channel, a vehicle, a vessel through which his God and the God of his ancestors, the Black Caucasians, spoke, and through whom his will, or his God and master, the God and master of the Black Caucasians' will, was done and is being done on the earth today. Now, I think that I have defined, using the English dictionary, along with my own emphasis, the analogies, who is a prophet. And hopefully I have proved to you that Charles Darwin was a prophet, or at the very least, you too may see for yourself that he is a prophet, or he was a prophet. Now, let me draw your attention to question number 2. What is his prophecy, or what are his prophecies? Well, simply put, and from my perspective, and no doubt all or most of his ardent converts, believers and faithful followers, also called Darwinians, will agree that all of his writings, in fact, all of his 25 published books, are prophetic writings, or at the very least, all 25 published books may, to some greater or lesser degree, be considered prophetic writings. But the 2 of his books that I have personally read and have affirmed at least 2 quotes from them to be prophetic and prophecies that are directed at my people are, and one, the origin of species by means of natural selection, or the preservation of favored races in the struggle for life. This is one of his first books that was published by John Murray Publishers in London in 1859. And the second book is called The Descent of Man and Selection in Relation to Sex. And that was also published by the same publisher, John Murray Publishers of London, and it was published in 1871. The thing that most of my people, the natural native earthly humans of high melanin and high carbon skin, are completely unaware of is the fact that the title of Charles Darwin's book, or book number 1, The Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, is prophetic in and by itself. In fact, most of my people are completely unaware of the fact that the original and correct title of his book is The Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life. This, from my perspective, is even more explicit a prophecy or a prediction. it is also all about, it is all about them. The book is all about them, meaning it is all about him, Charles Darwin, and his people or his race. It is all about their erroneous and deceptive racist ideologies. It is about them, the Black Caucasians, thinking that they are being favored above all others. And it's about them and their struggle for survival and struggle for life at the expense and at the detriment of all others, and by whatever means they deemed fit to continue surviving on this our planet Earth. So again, to fully answer the question, what is his prophecy, or what are his prophecies, please let me read a quote from chapter 5 of one of Darwin's book, his prophetic book, I might add, called The Descent of Man, and selection in relation to sex. And I quote, "At some future period, not distant as measured by centuries, the civilized races of man will most certainly exterminate and replace the savage races throughout the world. At the same time, the anthropomorphous apes, as Professor Shackleton has remarked, will no doubt be exterminated. The break between man and his nearest allies will then be wider, for it will intervene between man in a more civilized state, as we may hope, even then the Caucasian, and some ape as low as a baboon, instead of as between the Negro or Australian and the gorilla," unquote. Now, the portion of this quote that from my perspective I would like you to focus on, and one that I also think that all honest and reasonable human minds will no doubt affirm as being an unquestionable prophecy, or at the very least a prediction, and also an unquestionable prophecy and prediction that is directed at us, the people, that the civilized man, Charles Darwin, and his civilized race called savages, is as follows, and I quote, "At some future period, not very distant as measured by centuries, the civilized races of man will almost certainly exterminate and replace the savage race or the savage races throughout the world," unquote. This, from my perspective, is talking about the ultimate demise and the complete annihilation, or to use Charles Darwin's own word, the complete extermination of all the natural native earthly humans that Charles Darwin himself hereby in his writings denigratingly and contemptuously called the savage races throughout the earth. And the evidence has thus far shown that special emphasis has been placed on the extermination of those of us that are denigratingly and disparagingly called the Negroes and the black people by his Charles Darwin's alien race, his Charles Darwin's elite group of humankind, and those that consider themselves to be the civilized race, the EU race, or the European race, meaning the good race, the white race and the superior race, etc. The evidence has thus far shown, and their own historical records that they very proudly boast about, that they proudly immortalize and celebrate, has also testified to the fact that since their creation, meaning since the creation of the Caucasians by their creator God, and since their arrival upon the face of this our planet Earth, anywhere and everywhere they go, and anywhere and everywhere their presence are felt, They have brought and caused nothing but evil, diseases, disasters, sufferings, pain, death, and destruction upon all the earthly native inhabitants. Charles Darwin himself admitted, if not proudly acknowledged, this fact, and I quote, "Wherever the European had trod, death seemed to pursue the aboriginal," unquote. For your information, aboriginal and aborigines are words that they sometimes use to represent us that are the natural native earthly humans. However, for those of you that may have listened to my lectures, you must have known by now that we, the natural native earthly humans, are not originals or aborigines, but that we are natures, meaning we have no beginning and we have no end. But that's another subject for another time. Elsewhere in his own writing, he, Charles Darwin, also admitted to his people's sin and possible their sinful nature and characteristics. He said, and I quote, "If the misery of the poor be caused not by the law or the laws of nature, but by our institutions, great is our sin," unquote. That is Charles Darwin in Voyage of the Beagle. We, the natural native earthly humans, know of a fact that our woes are not the result of our mother nature and planet earth, or of our source mother nature, but we know and know of a fact that our woes are caused by the newly created mankind, the newly created humankind, the strange and Black Caucasians that are trying to conquer, control, dominate, subdue, colonize, and lord over Mother Nature, over our mother and planet Earth, and all her natural inhabitants. So let me quote the Black Caucasian Charles Darwin's prophecy again. At some future period, not very distant as measured by centuries, the civilized race or races of man will almost certainly exterminate and replace the savage races throughout the world, unquote. According to the so-called civilized man, the Black Caucasian Charles Darwin, our ultimate demise will most certainly take place within 2 centuries or within 200 years of his prophecy or his predictions. Or, to be frank, our demise will most certainly take place within 200 years of his race or races, meaning the Black Caucasians, plan for the deliberate extermination, if not deliberately planned mass extermination of us, the natural native earthly humans. And as I've mentioned before, special emphasis of this mass extermination are placed on those of us that are of high melanin or high carbon skin, that he called the Negroes and that his fellow Black Caucasians called the black people. And that is what is meant by Charles Darwin's end time prophecy. And that is the answer to question number 2. What is meant by Charles Darwin's end time prophecy? It is his end time prophecy for us. And the real end is very near, if not already at hand. Another relevant fact that I must point out here is that according to the record, the year of his prophecy, or the year of his prophetic utterances, was 1871. And if you subtract 1871 from the current year, 2014, which is the year in which I am doing this video, then we get 143 years. And if we subtract 143 from 200, we are left with 57 years. And if we are to consider his most earlier book, or at the very least quotes from his much earlier book titled The Origin of Species, by means of natural selection or the preservation of favored races in the struggle for life, which was published by the same by John Murray, publisher of London, in 1859. If we consider it to be his prophecies of our demise, then by subtracting 1859 from 2014, we have 155 years into the prophecy. And by subtracting 155 from 200, then we are only left with less than 45 years for us, the natural native earthly human, to be eradicated or to be exterminated by the Black Caucasians from off the face of the earth and be replaced by themselves. And it is written in their holy book, the Adamic race history and holy book, commonly known as the Holy Bible. This is what is meant by them replenishing the earth after they have completely gotten rid of us. Their goal is to fill up the earth with and by themselves. Therefore, if my calculation is accurate, then unless our great mother and source, Mother Nature, and our great ancestors intervene or continue to intervene, then we have less than 45 years to a maximum of 57 years left to be completely wiped off the earth and be replaced by the alien race or the alien group of humankind, also called the Black Caucasians. And if you think 45 to 57 years is a long time, then we are making a very sad mistake. Is Charles Darwin's prophecy being fulfilled on us, the natural native earthly human today? I think so. In fact, as I mentioned, Ebola is just one example, but more on that later. So the answer to this question is straightforward, yes. And one does not need any further explanation. And only, even a Black Caucasian would not be black enough to deny the fact that his prophecy is being fulfilled on us today, that we are being exterminated. They have tried everything, and they are using every means and every method necessary. How are they exterminating us? Let's look at that. They are exterminating us the same way by which they have been doing it since the time of their creation by their creator God, and was placed on this our planet Earth. And since we have the very unfortunate experience of encounter with them, and since they made their arrival known to us, the natural native earthly humans, through and by their evil deeds, they have been doing it slowly but surely, and in many cases very speedily. From then on, they have been and they are carrying out their mass extermination of us, the natural native earthly humans, slowly but surely. Sometimes they may have tweaked their evil methods and techniques a bit from time to time in an attempt to disguise themselves, who and what they are, and their true and real intentions. But they can't fool those of us that are wise and are looking at them through spiritual eyes. But the fact is that they are using their same evil methods, the same old evil techniques that their ancestors, since their arrival, have used to conquer, to capture, to steal, to subdue, to dominate, to colonize, to enslave, to exploit, and exterminate almost all, and in many cases all, of our fellow natural native earthly humans that they themselves admittedly call the indigenous people, or the indigenous peoples of the land or of the earth. They have used and they are using their same old methods and techniques, namely their cons and deceptions. They're using their same old lies. They have used their force, their black force, also known as their security forces and their police force. They have used and they are using their black war, as in the case of the British colonization, extermination, extinction, and genocide that was committed against my fellow natural native earthly humans, the Tasmanians, or the Tasmanian Aborigines, as they are called. They have used and they are using sterilization of all forms on us to be its forced sterilization, compulsory sterilization, be it forced sterilization, compulsory sterilization, be it sterilization through the use of their medications, their so-called planned parenthood, their birth control, their eugenics, you name it. They have used and they are using economics, their mark of the beast, their money, slavery, or forced labor. They have used and they are using genocides, cultural and all other forms of genocides. They have used and they are using foods, genetically modified and otherwise. They have used and they are using alcohol and its addictions, which for your information, alcohol is toxic and toxic is poison. And that is why when you drink it or drink too much of it or drink it too frequently and in excess, you become intoxicated. You're taking in poison. They design it, they make it, and they feed it to our people. They have used and they are using their weapons and weapons of mass destruction. They have used and they are using their covert operations and assassinations. They have and they are using their technologies and their inventions, their religions and their religious ideologies and confusions. They have used and they are using their biological warfare to exterminate, or more correctly, to eliminate, or more correctly, to exterminate us. And yes, they have used and they are using their scientifically engineered disease to exterminate us. These Black Caucasians even have patent for diseases. Let me repeat, these Black Caucasians, they even have patent for diseases and strains of diseases. And the question one must ask is this: why would they, or why are they patenting diseases? Or why do they patent diseases? Or more correctly, why do they patent the genetic sequence or sequences of diseases? And the answer is, it is for profit. It is for money. To make more and more money. And of course, to have more and more power and control over people and people's lives. And why would they patent diseases if they were not the creators of these diseases? That's another question we should be asking. Why would they patent these diseases if they are not the creators of it? Again, if they are not the creators and they are patented, they show that they are liars and thieves. So they are, just to prove, any way you look at them, these are dangerous humankind, a kind of human. Because if they say they did not create the disease and they are patenting it, or patenting, they own it and nobody else, blah, 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 it means that they are thieves, a thief in trying to take away that which is not theirs. And if they patent it because they create it to kill us all, to exterminate us, they have not changed and they can't change. The Black Caucasians are the scientific race of people. They can also be called the scientific people. They are a work of science. Their creator is also their scientific. In fact, their creator is also their scientist. And as such, they have scientific hearts. They have no warmth in them, but they can only pretend. They have no natural native earthly human soul. In other words, they have no sunshine in them. They are not sunshine people. Their soul is not of the sun. They are as cold, if not much colder, than the place from where they are from, or the place where they were created and originated, and the place where they became aware of themselves, the Caucasus Mountains, or the Caucasus Mountain. And thus, and their prophet, Charles Darwin, himself admitted this fact, that they are cold, they are scientific. And I quote, "A scientific man ought to have no wishes. A scientific man ought to have no affections, but a mere heart of stone." In fact, let me quote it exactly. And I quote again, Charles Darwin, he said, and I quote, "A scientific man ought to have no wishes, no affections, a mere heart of stone," unquote. Now, having heard all this, the two questions that those of us to whom it may concern may ask are: one, what can we do to be saved? Or what must we do in order to be saved or to be delivered from the evils that the Black Caucasians have brought upon us and upon the earth? And two, is there any hope for us? And the answer to question 2 is yes. There is hope, but the window of opportunity is closing rapidly. And to borrow a quote from one of Bob Marley's song called Exodus, and I quote, "Many more will have to suffer, and many more will have to die," unquote. Yes, I know, many more will have to suffer, and many more will have to die before we are delivered. Unfortunately, many more of us will have to suffer, and many more of us, the natural native earthly humans, will have to die at the hands of the enemies, the humankind, the mankind, the scientists, the scientific mind, the Black Caucasians. And in order to receive the answers to these two questions and more, I ask that you please join me in part 2 of this presentation, subtitled "The Civilized Race of Mankind, a Charles Darwin's Prophecy Revealed." That will be the next title. So, in the meantime and between time, please stay tuned to this, my YouTube channel called The Right Number, The Mystic Philosopher, for future commentaries and perspectives. And your comments, perspectives, suggestions, and feedback are welcome and appreciated, and will be appreciated. I am the Mystic Philosopher. Again, I thank you for listening and for watching.